Welcome to today's webinar hosted by the good people from FullContact who give you the power to stay fully connected with your contacts. My name is Pamela Herman, and on behalf of the FullContact team, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this very special presentation. There is so much great information that we have access to in our businesses about our customers, but one of the biggest challenges for organizations today is understanding how to leverage this data to help their business grow. The all too common culprits include poor customer data quality, inability to gather insights at scale, and difficulty integrating customer profiles across multiple systems. But here's the great news. You're in the right place, because when it comes to understanding how businesses can leverage technology to learn about their customers, Forrester research, they're leading the charge. They really are the best of the best. They're focused on helping organizations develop customer-obsessed strategies that drive growth. So for that reason, we've brought together our featured speaker, Joe Stanhope of Forrester Research, along with our very own Rick Porter, to learn how to identify or identity resolution sits at the intersection of customer understanding, customer experience, and marketing execution. And that's what you want, isn't it? You want to better understand your data so that you can better relate to and connect with your customers, right? So just a quick heads up. As your questions come up during this presentation, we invite you to just drop them in the questions area of your control panel there. We'll address them during the Q&A portion. We get rare access to Joe and his insights, so please take full advantage of it. Joe Stanhope is a vice president and principal analyst serving B2C marketing professionals. He is a marketing expert on the intersection of marketing and technology. Joe's work focuses on the future state of marketing and advertising technologies. Joe, we know there are a lot of demands on your time, so on behalf of the FullContact team, thank you so much for joining us today. And since you're a researcher, I want to kick this off with a one question survey for you. You ready, Joe?
Hit me.
Hit me. Okay. So Joe, you hail from Chicagoland, and as best I can tell, is there are three kinds of people that live there. There's White Sox fans, there's world champion Cubs fans, or there's none of the above. Where do you fit in?
I am a lifelong Cubs fan.
Well, you answered it.
It's been a great few months.
It has been a great few months, and you're teeing it up perfectly for me. You guys stick around to the end of this presentation, because we're going to share with you how you can become eligible to score tickets to see world champion Chicago Cubs right here in Denver at beautiful Coors Field. Stay tuned for that. So on that note, Joe, the floor is all yours. I'm going to make you presenter here.
Okay.
And the mic is all yours, my friend.
Okay, we're going to start sharing here. And you should see a little cover page. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Pamela. And I'd, of course, like to thank everyone for inviting me to be here, Rick Porter and his team. It's really a pleasure. And today, as Pamela mentioned, we're going to be talking about identity resolution and its power to help brands and marketers connect with their customers.
Joe, let me just interrupt you really quickly here. I don't believe that we can see your screen. We did for a nanosecond there, but then it dropped away. Can you just make sure that little button is...
Let me hit it again.
There we go. Now we see it.
It works.
Thank you.
Take two. Thank you, Pamela, for keeping me honest. I still maintain my great gratitude to the FullContact team, Rick Porter, and of course you, Pamela. So it's still a pleasure to be here. What we want to talk about today is identity resolution and how it's a powerful tool to help brands and marketers connect with their customers. So today we live in what Forrester calls the age of the customer. And this is a concept that Forrester pioneered about 4 or 5 years ago. And essentially, the age of the customer was intended to define a new epoch in the history of business, where we saw a fundamental shift in the way consumers and brands interact. And it's an incredibly important change in the way businesses work. Historically, we've seen that businesses very much controlled customer relationships. They determined who they communicated with, what they told their customers, how they told their customers information, and even the pace of that information and the detail of that information. And it was like that for a great many years. And now, driven primarily by technology, although I would posit that it's also very culturally driven, we've seen a fundamental shift in the table of how brands and consumers interact. And as consumers, our customers have an enormous amount of information at their fingertips. The most basic idea is the power of the devices that we have in our pockets or bags, our mobile phones, our smartphones. But we have access to very, very quickly at a huge amount of knowledge, information about products, pricing, location information. We can interact amongst ourselves about products and brands without ever including the brand at all. And this has, again, completely shifted the balance of power in customer relationships towards the customer. Not surprisingly, this has a huge trickle-down effect on how corporations think about their strategies, think about their customers, and even the technology they buy and how they apply it to those customer relationships. And certainly, we're in the stage of the customer, and customers are indeed very, very empowered. But I would also invite you to reflect upon your own attitudes and the relationships that you have as a consumer with the companies that you do business with, and think about it even beyond that, and think about the idea that perhaps we're even very entitled. We basically expect marketers today to be nothing short of omniscient. We've raised the bar so much that we as customers expect that the companies that we work with are going to get what I want in my immediate context in that precise moment of need. It's an enormous expectation, but we all feel like it's perfectly reasonable today as consumers. And so this is the market or the ecosystem that brands and consumers now operate in. And this is very much powered, again, by the idea that we are tremendously connected to one another through many and many complicated modes. If you look at the adoption and the volume of activity that ties us together and gives us opportunities to interact, the use of smartphones, the amount of time that we use them, the amount of time we use multiple devices, even multiple times a day and in multiple locations, the sheer volume of email communication, and many people would poo-poo email as an old school communication technology, but it's very much alive and well and very much a part of this equilibrium of new connection. And of course, social media accounts, the number of them that we have that allow us to connect even deeper and even further. So we have a huge number of opportunities to interact with one another and with brands. In many ways, it's a great time to be a consumer, and it's actually, even though this can be disruptive for brands to keep up with the pace and velocity and sheer volume of this connected world, it's an amazing opportunity. It's a great time to be a marketer as well as a former and current marketer myself. I am happy about any time that I'm presented with more opportunities to engage with consumers. And in fact, having consumers that are empowered and want to reach out to me as a marketer, that's very exciting as well. So we live in a great time, and it's a great opportunity to make the most of it. But the reality is that just going digital is not enough. It's not enough with today's sophisticated, highly connected consumer just to have a mobile application or to push some ads or some SMS messages. We have to go beyond merely showing up in these channels. And a lot of this is driven by the idea, the unpleasant and very real fact is that we don't want advertising. We don't want, as consumers, for information to be pushed at us. We don't want to feel like we're being advertised to. We want, again, to have real connections. And to do that, what marketers have to do is they have to sit in the middle of a world where consumers are highly empowered and very, very active, but they don't want to be talked at. So how do we create the ability to be in context? How do we create the ability to operate in the moment? And in Forrester's view, this means that marketers have to harness customer context. And we break customer context down into actually three phases, three legs of a stool, if you will. The first being understanding each customer's unique profile. Who is that person? Where are they? Like, are they a Chicago Cubs fan like myself? Second, what is our relationship history with that individual? What have they bought from us? In what order? Do they buy things certain times of year? What have we marketed them to about? What haven't they bought from us? And finally, the third part is what we call situational context. And this is the area where a lot of my clients are actually working very hard right now. They might have very strong profile and transactional information, but developing situational context, which is the ability to know what are they contacting from? What device is a customer using right now as they reach out to me? Where are they in location terms? And beyond that, what's going on where they are? The weather. Are they at a music festival? Is it a Cubs game? What time of year is it where they are? Does that affect either where they are in my product cycle or the customer life cycle, or the context of why they're reaching out to me? And so this is a huge amount of very, very useful information that we can bring to bear to be not only contextually relevant, but of course operate in the moment with a customer. And if you can harness customer context, that really gives you the ability to shift from something that I would call very marketer-driven to being customer-driven. And so on the left side are a lot of the semantics and concepts that I spend a lot of my day talking to marketers about. Traditional marketing constructs. We think about campaigns and targeting and buying media and transactions. But when we can be contextual, we can change the conversation. Right? It really becomes about engagement and interactions and creating a mutually beneficial exchange of value. And so we refocus and become very customer driven. We even measure ourselves differently. Instead of becoming purely about how we did on a cost per thousand of, say, some media or some display, it becomes very much about engagement. So for example, I've got a consumer electronics manufacturer client that has actually been reworking the way they measure all their marketing campaigns, and they're now working towards measuring everything on a cost of what they call a quality engagement, because they know if they can do that, it drives interest in their brand for new customers, and it drives existing customers to engage correctly so that they will buy yet more products or they will upgrade. Now, the key to contextual marketing, the key to making this shift is binding together understanding of customers with our interactions with customers. And Forrester is a framework that we use to divide up the various capabilities that accomplish that. And we call these both systems of insights and systems of engagement. And we use this kind of architecture across all of Forrester, across all the many, many, many technologies and parts of the business and enterprise that we cover. But it works very, very nicely in a marketing world. Systems of insights make a lot of sense. These are the systems and the tools that bring us customer data, help us do analysis and generate insights so we understand a customer, so we can target customers and build audiences. Engagement are the tools for marketers that actually help us create an interaction and deliver that to the customer. So it's your orchestration tools like marketing automation and the actual endpoints that would deliver an actual interaction. And we have to bring these things together because, again, if we're going to be contextual, if we're going to be relevant, if we're going to be in the moment, right, it requires a deep understanding and the ability to deliver in the right way at the right time. So we can't allow these to run in parallel any longer. Now, of course, that can be easier said than done because marketers are dealing with certainly no shortage of data. There is a deluge of information and data, and even though we're trying to get more, it's not because there was a shortage, it's because we want to create context. So marketers oftentimes look at this and organizations in general and say, well, now I'm trying to match up so many permutations, every possible piece of data to every possible interaction, and that is legitimately extremely overwhelming. In fact, 73% of companies tell Forrester that they do want to be data-driven, but when we're being realistic and we look at where the rubber hits the road, we see that only 29% are actually good at doing that. So certainly there is a rift between turning data into action. And so we need to make that connection, right, and create a level of portability and a cycle between these things so that it becomes really about having the right data that delivers insights so we can create effective actions and create a cycle of continuous learning, right? And again, this is a big thing. This requires the right people in organization. This requires processes. Of course, it requires some technology, but it also requires what I call identity. Identity, in many ways, is the fundamental tie that binds. It is the result of bringing data and insights and engagement together. And so I strongly believe, and when we advise our clients at Forrester, we talk to them quite a bit and are getting a lot of interest from our clients at Forrester directly and proactively about using identity as the binding factor, as the connective tissue for contextual marketing that starts to make it possible to transit between insights and engagement. And if you can do that, if you can have strong identity resolution capability, it gives you really three strong functional abilities. The first is this ability to deliver that in-the-moment coordinated customer experience that moves across channels, interactions, and devices over time. It gives you the ability to have deep customer insights, to really understand that customer journey, to know what your customers need and want. And of course, it gives us the ability to do data governance. Anytime we talk about identity and we're talking time we're talking about our customers. I think we should be talking about proactively the ability to do strong data governance. And this is, of course, the ability to monitor and maintain any regulatory requirements that we have on our business, but also observing our customers' preferences so we can, again, be increasingly relevant. And when you break it down and look at all of the tasks and all the capabilities that marketers have today in modern marketing, almost all of them, to a one, are actually powered by identity resolution. They rely on the fundamental assumption that you're going to be able to recognize that customer and use it to span multiple data sets or pieces of understanding. If we look at many of these use cases, things like data management, having an identifier, segmentation, targeting, onboarding, which is bringing offline data into online segments for media and display, these are all creating coordinated customer experiences. When we look at capabilities like having a visibility of the customer journey, building audiences, insights and measurement, and doing attribution, these are all about deep customer insights. And then customer preference management across channels and devices is really the holy grail of data governance and stewardship. So everything we do in marketing is based on this idea of identity resolution, even if we don't talk about it enough. And so because it's so important, because it underlies almost everything we do all day long as marketers, I believe that identity resolution is in fact a strategic initiative. I think it's a capability that in channel-centric or channel-siloed worlds, we've been able to get by with and kind of make up as we go along. But as we move towards creating cohesive cross-channel, cross-device, longitudinal customer experiences, you really have to plan ahead. You have to think in advance and plan and bring the data and technology together to create that identity resolution capability to support these more comprehensive customer experiences. And that requires us to make a fair amount of progress in how we address identity resolution today. First and foremost, we have to really move past the historical known versus unknown identity framework. I think in most organizations today, mostly when we talk about identity today, it becomes very binary. We have this perception that I either know a customer, maybe it's first-party data or some kind of PII or a known customer, and if I don't have those pieces of identity, they are an unknown quantity to me. They are an unknown or anonymous or maybe just a cookie to me in a browser. And sometimes the perception is that unknown data is less than. It is less important, less valuable fundamentally than known customer data, right? And there's nothing really in between, and it's really either or, and it's all focused on these two extremes in identity. And I don't believe that that is the case, because the reality is that we're surrounded by identity fragments. Every campaign, every device, every channel touch point creates identifiers, right? And what we have to master as marketers and as brands is the ability to start bringing these identifiers together, which is not to say that that's necessarily easy. These identifiers are very different. They have different levels of permanence. They have different privacy requirements. They're in different formats. They sometimes expire. So they're not apples to apples type identifiers, but the magic is in being able to bring these together now and start to apply them. And to really start grabbing out at these pools of identity that are created by the fragments of the customer experience, we have to understand two major critical factors. The first is that identity resolution is not black and white. Again, this is a vestige of the traditional approach to identity. You're either known or unknown. It's a 1 or a 0. It's black and white. And that simply isn't true. In fact, identity is a continuum, and it is much more complex, and there are shades of gray between that known and unknown, right? Where we know them over a different period of time or multiple sessions. There are varying levels of persistency. There are various applications of various levels of identity over time. And this is perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be a on or off, a good or bad type discussion, because different degrees of identity relate to different levels of a customer life cycle. As we learn more and more about a customer, we develop a different level of identity resolution and a different kind of relationship with them. So that needs to match up anyway. If we knew all the information in the world about somebody, but they weren't a customer yet, or we didn't have permission to reach them yet, that wouldn't be appropriate. So we can marry up the customer relationship level, type of relationship we have, the life cycle stage, to that level of identity on that continuum. The second important piece we have to remember is that identity resolution isn't a one-time project. In fact, it never stands still. I perceive identity resolution as a continuous, always-on process. And when we picked the terminology identity resolution at Forrester, it was in fact very, very purposeful. We did that because we wanted to imply that identity resolution is more than actually just an identifier. Again, this is the historical framework talking, where we think about the world in terms of keys, and we're going to create a single key that matches everything together. And we don't often think about the long-term implications of how we're going to manage that or run it, or how we make it actionable. And so the semantics of identity resolution were very much designed to reflect that it is a continuous process, and we want it to be actionable. And so, in fact, the core of this breaks down into 4 steps. First, yes, we are going to collect identity keys from that universe, right, that surrounds us, of identifiers that our activities throw off. And we do want to try to match those together. And we can do that using a wide variety of techniques, using many data sources and capabilities to create the most cohesive linkage across these various identifiers. But that's not enough. If we just had a bunch of identifiers sitting in a database, that would really be shelfware for the marketer, because the marketer is always about generating insights and engaging with that customer in the moment. So we need to take identifiers, we actually have to tie them to profiles. We have to take the descriptive data, right, the profile, the transactional information, the situational context, and we have to link it up with our identifiers. And then we have to apply that identity. We have to make it available for our marketing use cases, right, for preference management, for coordinated customer experiences, for deep customer insights. And so I've got 4 ways that you can think about identity resolution in your own organization. There isn't a one-size-fits-all way to do identity resolution. And I wish there was a very easy yes or no binary way to do this that everyone could follow and achieve some kind of marketing nirvana. And unfortunately, different industries, different businesses, different kinds of customer relationships have varying requirements because they are different businesses. And we have to tune our identity resolution approach and strategy to our own business. So I wanted to try to give you a few ideas that you can take back. I know you're spending some time with us today, which we really appreciate, but give you something to take away from the call to really think about and try to tune to your own specific requirements, because I'm not going to try to give you a one-size-fits-all answer here. So let's think about 4 practical considerations to help you understand identity resolution. The first is, how do we assess identities? And again, many people think that, well, if I'm going to assess identity, I have to know literally everything about a person. It's either on or it's off. And again, I disagree with that fundamentally. Because of that continuum of identity, I actually advise Forrester clients to turn that advice on its head and think about the world in terms of how they want to apply identity. So rather than starting with the idea that we're going to build a warehouse or a database or create a bunch of identities together, think about it in terms of how are we going to interact with customers? What kind of insights do we need to generate? Because in fact, that's what defines the level of identity that you need to support the work that you do. You don't need an abstract, perfect level of identity if you're not going to use it, right? You don't want to create something that's too far to the left towards anonymous or unknown if your use cases demand a higher level of granularity. So think about how you're going to interact with customers, what your marketing and analytics use cases are, and that allows you to understand where on the spectrum of identity you actually fall, and that helps you define your requirements. Second, build and manage profiles. We put a huge amount of effort into the creation of that initial environment, and of course we're going to do that. What we don't tend to do, and I think this is a general human personality thing, is we don't always think enough about how we're going to manage something on a go-forward basis. And the reality is that identity is changing every second of every day, right? Information is expiring, people are getting new devices, they're interacting with you in new ways. The way you recognize and interact with a customer is always dynamic and changing. So we have to be prepared to manage this asset of identity that we're building. And we have to consider that up front. So as we build profiles, we have to think about, how are you going to manage this? How are we going to add new data to our identities? How are we going to purge data off? For example, some information may expire Cookies are an example. We may have privacy things we have to, or preferences that we have to do, right? Some people may opt out. Some people may tell you, I prefer to get email instead of text messages. We're going to have to purge data off sometimes or flag it so it can be used in the correct way. And we have to do housekeeping. We have to deduplicate data. We have to format it. We have to household or maybe use different levels of resolution to data. And of course, perform general data hygiene, like updating addresses. So there's a lot of ins and outs that go with managing this asset on a long-term basis. And then we always have to have an eye towards how are we going to use it, which means distribution. We're going to have to format this information. We have to connect it up to other systems for our analysis and our engagement. We sometimes might have to anonymize data, right, for certain non-PII or anonymous applications. So we have to have the processes to make that data actionable and connect it up for analysis, orchestration, and delivery. 3, take data stewardship very, very seriously. I would be remiss if I did a discussion with you about identity resolution. We didn't talk about data stewardship. Now, rest assured, I'm not going to give you a lecture about regulatory compliance and all the laws and privacy all over the world. My assumption is that you have very great compliance and risk and attorneys to help you determine your commitments. But I think we should have a talk about it because it's always with us when we're talking about understanding and using data about our customers. And when I think about data stewardship, for me as a marketer, it comes down to the concept of usability of data. And there are 3 flavors of usability of data to me: formal, technical, and emotional. Formal, which is the highest level, is your regulatory and privacy compliance type requirements. These are the aspects based on where you operate and the commitments maybe of the industry that you're in and so on that are not optional. You must follow these rules to the letter of the law or whatever requirements have been set before you. And again, I assume that you're going to handle these and cover these to the very best of your ability as good actors in this space. The second is technical. Now, this gets into the tolerances by which you set your identity resolution capabilities. The easiest way to think about it is the concept of over and under matching. And depending on your use cases, depending on your industry, you might want to think about the technical capabilities of matching in different ways. I like to think about it and ask clients about ideas like, what happens in your business if you undermatch records? What if there are 2 Joe Stanhopes coming in and you don't connect them as a single person, or vice versa? What happens if you over combine records? What if you combine Joe Stanhope with my wife Jenny Stanhope and now we're a household crammed into one person? What happens in that case to your marketing, to your compliance efforts? So think about the ramifications and how the tightness that you want to set, the actual technical matching and hygiene and management processes of your identity resolution capabilities. And this can go wrong in significant ways. I myself have had problems, for example, with a telco where they over combined my records at the telco, which were mobile phones, with, in fact, my father's home phone. And that was an interesting over-combine example that does have potential FCC regulatory implications to it. So you have to be really careful about these things and think about those permutations and possibilities in advance. And again, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer to it 100%, right? Because it's going to vary by your business, your industry, the kinds of relationships you have with your customers. And the third is emotional usability. And the watchword on this is just because you can use the data doesn't always mean you should, right? So some data, even if there is a formal permission to use it, even if technically you can create the appropriate level of accuracy, sometimes it is a step too far and you are violating perhaps someone's trust or the perception of trust, or it creates dissonance in a relationship. If you're just selling perhaps magazines, and magazines are great, but all of a sudden you go and you use a person's data to create an enormously granular, specific, and in some ways intrusive kind of relationship, that doesn't match up with the business you're in. So think about the emotional usability of the information and identity that you're creating, because you are fundamentally creating an enormous marketing superpower with identity resolution. The amount of understanding, the amount of interaction that you can craft based on strong identity resolution is enormously powerful. And it's hard to fix if you go too far inadvertently. And then finally, I want to strongly encourage you to take responsibility for quality and identity resolution. And what does that mean? It means that when you talk to suppliers in the industry, and you even talk to your peers, you're going to talk about things like matched rates and quality, and everyone's got different definitions for these things. It's very frustrating, very difficult to create a true apples-to-apples comparison across vendors when you're looking at them, between even within your industry, with your peers. It's hard to know what's good, what's bad, and what's improving. And so I encourage my clients, don't let someone tell you what quality means. Don't let someone else or a vendor tell you what you should be doing here. You have to take responsibility as the marketer for the quality of your own identity resolution. Be responsible for it. And there's a lot of different ways to measure it, right? So think about how you want to measure identity resolution. Think about what those numbers mean to you. And of course, always be thinking about continuous improvement. And that's the way you probably approach all of your marketing, is continuous improvement. And identity resolution should be no different. So indeed, you are going to end up talking about match rates at some point, right? And this is a basic and fundamental concept in identity resolution, but make sure you understand the precise definitions of what a match is, and use this as a basic yardstick, but not the sole yardstick for understanding how your process is operating. I would strongly advise you also to measure the concept of addressability. Sometimes this gets positioned as scale. This is really the number of profiles or the number of records or customers that you can actually contact. And this goes beyond matching, right? Because just matching some records doesn't necessarily create a fully addressable contact. And this is critical because you're actually defining your marketing universe when you measure addressability. Third, think about accuracy. Creating a match, if it's low accuracy, doesn't help, right? Again, if it can't be addressable, if it's poor quality, if you're matching the wrong things, if you're getting to the wrong people, that is low accuracy, low quality. So add on the accuracy concept. And the basic definition of accuracy is, am I actually reaching the same people I targeted? You know, right, when I create things like campaigns or personalization. If, for example, I meant to market to females in California, you know, when we look at the responder files, did females in California actually respond to us? Next is persistence. And this is the practice of looking at your addressable profiles over time. And it really goes to how robust your profiles are. Because if we're trying to create cohesive customer experiences across devices and channels, and in a longitudinal way across that customer journey, that means we need to be able to recognize a customer over the long term, over time. So persistence tells us, and you can measure it in days actually, how long have you had an addressable profile for each customer and on average, or for each segment. And this goes to, again, you know, if you have poor, robust profiles, if they are not robust, say a cookie expires and you lose visibility to a customer, that's a problem. Right? If you lose a device and that was what was stringing everything together, or they opt out and you lose the entire profile, you need to think about how you create persistence in your identities. And as always, the proof is in the pudding. How does identity resolution drive performance in your marketing? And this goes to doing ROI calculations, lift calculations based on records that have gone through your identity resolution process and those campaigns versus a controlled set of records. Now, this takes a fair amount of time to set up and a little bit of effort. I don't think you have to do it every single campaign by any means, but this is what tells you, hey, we're investing time and money and people in identity resolution, and we're getting lift out of it. It is providing value back to our business, which again is something you do for the rest of your marketing mix. So why not do it for identity resolution? So given how important I believe identity resolution is, at Forrester, we think that identity resolution is corporations' next competitive battleground. Because if you think about it, many of your competitors can buy the same technologies that you have. They can get access to many of the same data points. They can buy a lot of the same media. How do you create competitive advantage in these very, very tight markets where everybody has access to many of the same resources? Well, we believe identity resolution and owning and controlling and building the identity graph of your customers is one of the few truly unique assets that corporations can build today. And so we're strongly encouraging organizations to take control of this, to own it. I've even gone so far as to say I believe it's something that belongs on the balance sheet of corporations as they monetize it, both internally and externally. So to recap, one, start with the use cases. Don't blindly go and build a giant warehouse of keys or identities until you know how you're going to use it. Don't chase a golden record. You don't need academic perfection in identity resolution. You need the right level of identity resolution. Third, go beyond the traditional mindset. Think in terms of the continuum, not in terms of a binary known or unknown world. Fourth, never lose sight of the risks. I'm not saying don't pursue this or don't use data. Your customers want you to be more relevant and more personalized and in the moment, but make sure you do it in the right way. And finally, you want to measure this. You want to be in control of it. That means you have to understand how it's doing. And so I would encourage you to start establishing benchmarks today of how you match records and the levels of identity and quality you have across those key metrics, and use that to start tracking now. So when you're investing in identity resolution moving forward, you'll be able to track the efficacy and improvements and lifts that you see as you make those investments. And with that, I'm going to pass it back, and we're going to move on.
Terrific, Joe. Fantastic work. Thank you so much for all of your hard work and your valuable insights. This is amazing. Bring it all home for us today is our very own Rick Porter. Rick leads the Enterprise Solutions and Services team for FullContact. They work with brands and partners to ensure clients get maximum value out of APIs and data products. His career-long passion has been focused on the strategic use of data to inform and improve decision-making. And that's something every organization requires in today's business. Wouldn't you all agree with that? So Rick, thank you so much. The mic is yours. And we see your screen. Thank you.
Okay, good deal. You guys can hear me okay as well?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks, Pamela, for the kind intro. And thanks for all that are on the line today. I know that you guys are taking busy time out of your schedules, and appreciate you listening in. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to thank Joe and Forrester for what we believe is the very important work that they're doing in stressing the strategic significance of getting identity right. And that actually informs kind of where I want to pick up and kind of take the rest of this discussion. I'll be fairly brief, and I'll touch on the key points at a fairly high level, but I do want to make sure that we give you a sense of just how you can actually use some of the cutting edge technology to help as you continue to push down this journey of using identity in the right ways. How you can build a robust partner ecosystem to make sure that while you're not chasing the golden record, you have a multifaceted way of just constantly building on that capability. And last and certainly not least, I want to make sure that I wrap this with some use cases to show some of the benefits and some of the capabilities that can be exercised by getting identity done that much more correctly. So I'm going to start there, and I thought it might be appropriate to just kind of set some of the context around what FullContact believes. So let's see. Okay, so let's start with a simple game of Simon Says. You guys are probably familiar with Simon Sinek. He's a very inspirational speaker, and I think that's appropriate for the topic here. And DMA this past year, he highlighted that he believes those who understand people the best are the ones that win. And at its core, this is a very human thing, right? I mean, we are, whether we're dealing one with another, or if you have a brand dealing with other people, they want to be talked to in a voice that assumes that you know a little something about me and that you're trying to be relevant in the discussion or the dialogue that we're having. And so we think this is probably a really important thing in the age of the customer, and more specifically, it's core to who FullContact is and what we're all about. You see some of the ideas here. We believe, like Simon, that it's all about people. We believe that fully connecting with people with identity at the core is what ultimately drives success for the organization, but really for the relationship as well. And we believe that ultimately, as we like to put it internally, it's about being awesome with people. And more kind of in a broader setting, that being awesome is creating great customer experiences. And so these are things that have been with FullContact from our founding, and they continue to guide our path forward. Before I step any further into the deck, I thought it would be appropriate just give those that may be less familiar with FullContact a little bit of background. Founded in 2010, headquartered out of Denver. And really at the core of our mission has been this ongoing push for driving identity resolution. And we do this in a variety of ways. We have apps that individuals can use, but we also have data products, APIs that are available for enterprise and mid-market brands to use in some of the ways that I'm going to further explore, but all centered around this concept of identity that Joe spent the early part of this discussion covering. So with that said, before we get too deep into the discussion, I thought that I'd share a little humor with you guys. And you know, there's a lot of truth that is said in jest. So I would just highlight here that, you know, when Joe talks about going beyond the traditional mindset, I'm trying to pick up on that theme by just highlighting that if customer centricity has been about you, the brand, you're probably missing the point. Not to be too critical, but there is a bit of a pivot that is focused on really understanding who the people are and then using that full kind of people view to really drive the engagement model. So I always like to show a picture of what I think has traditionally been representative of, you know, where brands have been along some of the continuum that Joe was describing. And what you see here is an example of a silhouette intentionally, but you also see a little bit of transactional information out to the left, and you can kind of see little bits and pieces of information. We may have a name, we may know something about gender. So this is, you know, just the standard set of information. But if you're really operating in the age of the customer, you have to ask yourself a serious question. Is this sufficient? Do I know enough about this customer to actually be able to personalize my messaging? And if the answer to that is no, just realize that you may be putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage. And the truth be told, we see in one survey, a recent survey, we see as many as 80% of companies are still way too dependent upon purely a basic demographic and purchase history view. Again, this is not to in any way knock that those are in fact important components of understanding identity and your customers in general. I just think that it's important to realize in the age of the customer that it is not sufficient and that you really have to continue to push forward and acquire more sophisticated capabilities. And most brands are actually moving in that direction. So one of the things that we like to talk about very specifically at FullContact is this notion of digital identity. And we believe that vendors like FullContact are actually helping to unlock this digital identity. And in doing so, we give you a very rich opportunity to learn new data elements or new attributes about your customers. You can see some of those highlighted here, everything from adding social identities and profiles into the overall mix of what you know about your customers. And then some of the derivative data that comes from that. So now you can start to understand things like reach and influence, or who's engaging a competitive brand or your brand. You can also build out a taxonomy of lifestyle and product categories so that you really get this more robust or 360-degree view, which has been the holy grail for marketers for some time. And as Joe has pointed out, look, there's no magic here. There's no perfect answer. But if you can put the bits and pieces together, I like to refer to it as a game of inches. And so the more that you can know a little bit more, know a little bit sooner, you actually have that much more of a chance of continuing to stay ahead of your competitors. And that's really what it's all about. And another interesting component of this is as you start to identify some of these social identifiers, you also get the ability to start unlocking some of this big data that oftentimes is kind of passing you by without context, certainly without customer context. So the more that you can actually do these things, the more you can actually take some of what may have been random signals and convert it into something that is a part of the customer memory. And so let's change the turn the page here and talk a little bit about some of the how. I want to get more tangible for everyone as we start to wrap this up. A critical first step is really tapping into the underlying data asset or customer core, as you see here in the big red circle. What FullContact helps with is really taking data, simple data points like email, and using that email as a means of attaching it to other social identifiers. And then from there, you can start the process of learning more. There really is a bit of a mindset that just starts with, hey, the more that we can identify some of these persistent identities, especially one like email, and link it to other persistent identifiers, the stronger the capability of learning about those customers over time, because they tend not to fade away as some of the other methods that you will by all means continue to use, but this is a nice complementary benefit of having that. And you can see that while the 76% is shown here, the integration challenges are certainly real. That there are ways that you can kind of collaborate with those whose mission it is in the marketplace to help large organizations solve this problem. And that's really where FullContact is specializing in trying to walk alongside and not necessarily replace a lot of the legacy technologies that have been there for years or even decades, but to make sure that it's an important component, especially in the digital world. So let's talk about, the uniqueness of the data asset that we think is important. And I'll try and work in the picture. I've actually used myself as a guinea pig here. You can see that there's some largely fictional, but not that far off information about me and who I am. And this is representative of what an organization might know to start the process. And as you push from left to right, leveraging FullContact APIs with 50 billion contact versions and 2.6 billion social profiles, you can see the stats here. It actually converts that very streamlined version of me into someone who you can see. This is actually a visual that we offer. You can see I work for FullContact. You can see certain facts about FullContact. You can also see some of the social identifiers here. And if I were to kind of more fully flesh this out, you would actually be able to pick up some of the affinities or interests that are associated with someone like myself. All of this obviously done in a way that pays particular care and attention to being very accurate, to scaling, so that you're not just doing this for niche audiences. It's in a business that we're in, if you don't care about secure data and privacy, you will not be in business for long. And so as someone who really takes these issues very seriously, FullContact is always kind of at the leading edge of making sure that privacy in particular is something that we are on top of. So behind the scenes, if you were to take a glimpse into what's happening, just to give you a sense of where some of the possibilities lie, you can see on the far left there's CRM data and transactional data. Notice here that Susan actually shows up as two different individuals in the picture. One on a loyalty card and the other in the CRM database, or maybe an email marketing program. FullContact is one that can actually help you start to stitch Susan together as a human, and not just stop there in terms of email to email stitching, but also to expand that out into Twitter and potentially other systems of engagement. And that is an important point, because that is the backbone that allows you to start to enhance some of the little things that you can actually learn about your customers to kind of create this continuous learning engine, and ultimately use all of those data points that you can see in the picture view here, pushing those engagement data points back into the core, so that as time evolves, you have a more robust picture of who that customer is. And FullContact actually makes this process seamless for our customers. They can ingest this data directly into their databases in a variety of ways that meets them where they are. And it goes a long way, we believe, towards helping, marketers who are really struggling, as you can see here with 24% saying that they are highly confident in their single view of the customer. This is certainly not going to fully solve for that, but it is a step in the right direction. And I think that whole incremental mindset of just making those small improvements to get better as it relates to identity is the right way to be. So with that said, you ultimately end up in a place where my screen is kind of going a little crazy on me. You end up with this whole person view of Susan. And so that is, to me, where you want to be. So we started out with the silhouette view that we were kind of, she's maybe a female and she bought X in the way of these particular shoes or whatever the category may be, and you can kind of migrate to a place where you understand Susan as a whole person. Specifically how we help in terms of some of the data products themselves, you can see the person API and company API really fully describe who the people are, or who the companies that they work for are. You can see that they're pretty robust data assets in isolation, but working in concert, they become that much more powerful. And we also have an email verification so that you are able to work everything from, understanding that it is in fact a valid email to a verified email that actually exists on a server. So we're talking about a soup to nuts capability that starts with, yes, it's real, and let's tell you something more about those people to help you, the brand, build out more rich customer profiles. So as we push towards a wrap here, I thought that I would just share with you some use cases, just a few examples of how we can support you across the life cycle, because I think that in order for brands to really excel, they can't just be able to nail awareness or to be able to nail advocacy. They have to actually be able to work with their internal IT. They have to be able to work with an ecosystem of partners to help them execute across buyer journeys in general. And so I will start with a simple kind of awareness and making sure that you actually understand your audience. We actually encounter this quite a bit as we start to tease out some of the information that we can pull from the realm of big data. Sometimes the understanding of audience that you would want to be there is not necessarily as effective as it could be. And so at times we've been able to uncover certain facts like maybe mommy bloggers are more aligned with your core audience than some other segments like hipsters and fashionistas in this example. And we've actually seen that have a huge impact on running influencer programs and driving actual sales to the cash register. And so that's one way. I'm accelerating because I realize we're running out of time here. Second, you can also start to gather signals, the voice of customer. So in the use case here, we actually work with one brand who was in the process of considering a strategic acquisition that actually ultimately did go through. And they wanted to understand what their customers were thinking about this product category that was emerging. They wanted to understand their sentiment toward it. They wanted to understand the momentum. Is that moving in a positive direction? Is it growing over time? And so the more that you can actually fine tune these signals, you can actually look at the, an aggregation of individuals in your customer file to be able to understand how you're trending. And so another example of how you can actually use what starts out as identity data and then gather signals around it to really support very strategic things in the business. And last but not least, and I'll conclude here, this is just an example of how you can leverage some of these same social signals to help with personalization. We have an affinity graph as well, and so you can see in this example, you can go and find micro audiences. Sometimes this data is not embedded in the transactions because maybe you're pushing into a new market, maybe you're pushing into a whole new category, and so in those instances, you might be able to kind of divine what's trendy or what's luxury, even if you're not typically selling into those, and use some of the social signals to define who are existing customers that would fit that profile, and use that as a means to A/B test, what level of engagement and conversion you would ultimately be able to push towards. So again, very quick in terms of just giving you a quick overview of some of the use cases that can be executed. There are many, many more, and happy to kind of walk through those as people either have questions here today, or if they want to reach out after the webinar concludes, happy to kind of broaden that discussion. So that's it for me, and with that, I will turn it back over to Pamela. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Rick. Wow, thank you for tying that all together for us with a nice, bright bow. Now, my friends, it's your opportunity to ask questions from Joe and from Rick. A couple questions came in. First of all, somebody asked, is this presentation going to be available? Yes, absolutely. We'll be sending you a follow-up email so you can watch this again. And please don't hesitate to share this with other people within your organization, or perhaps peers of yours who could benefit from this information. It's really, really valuable. Want to move into a question here that I think either Joe or Rick, actually, let's pose this one for Joe. Joe, you talked about the unknown identity framework. Are there some identifiers that are more useful or more important than others, and how would an organization, pinpoint that?
Well, not all identifiers are created equal. Certainly, they can represent very different levels of resolution. They have different levels of persistence. Again, different permissible purposes and how they're used and collected. I think the holy grail, or the kind of the most standard, right, or most desired keys that we see out there that are valued because of their breadth, their recurrence, and their ability to tie back to a customer or a consumer would be the social ID, the email address, or the phone number. Because these are all very useful because they start tying together accounts, right, registrations, and they can cross over into mobile devices as well, which is highly, highly valued.
Excellent. Thank you. And Rick, question here for you. You talked about data hygiene. Can you give us some idea as to how expensive this is to businesses who don't manage this data? Let's say as it relates to campaigns, do we have some general understanding of how expensive this is?
Without specifics, I would say that certainly on the ability to kind of create the validation and verification, it's a relatively inexpensive. We think most customers find this to be, very cost effective, especially in light of, what some of the other costs in terms of deliverability issues on the other side would look like. So very manageable. I would say that, creating the full-blown profiles is a fraction of what you would think of when you consider all of the time and energy and the consulting implementations that have historically been a part of continuing to build out a customer data asset. It's much lower in terms of the timeliness to implement these solutions, as well as the expense of getting them up and running.
You talked about strategic acquisition, and I thought that was really interesting. Are when you're talking about the asset value of an organization, how big is this data, and especially how cleaned up it is and scrubbed it is to an organization who might be thinking of selling, and perhaps VCs are looking at your organization.
Yeah, in fact, we've actually encountered this on both sides. So we've had private equity companies talk to us about using some of this capability we've outlined today as a means for kind of evaluating possibility of acquiring companies or making strategic investments in companies. We've also had, as I kind of highlighted in the deck, brands using some of the signals that they can pick up from their own customer database to understand how their customers are thinking or engaging, prospective brands and or markets or categories that those brands represent. So yeah, it's a pretty diverse set of use cases there.
That is amazing. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. We are at the top of the hour. Very quickly before we bid you adieu, what are y'all doing on May 10th through the 12th? FullContact is hosting a very exciting live event that brings together the best minds in customer intelligence. We want to invite you to Connect 17. It's going to be in Denver, along with hundreds of other professionals who share the vision of being awesome with their customers and embark on a journey from gathering data to creating exceptional customer experiences. Check out the lineup of top-rated speakers on our webpage. It's fullcontact.com/connect. Register today. Not only will you get early bird pricing, but a limited number of registrants will receive a free ticket. This goes back to Joe's little query here, to the Colorado Rockies versus world champion Chicago Cubs, arguably one of the most beautiful stadiums with the best view of the Rockies. We're going to drop the link in the chat for you right here. Lastly, before we let you commence with your day, I have a very big favor to ask. We're going to be following up with a very brief survey, so you can let us know your thoughts and provide feedback on today's presentation. And this really helps us improve the way we support you. It'll only take you 2 minutes, I promise. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And lastly, just follow us on Facebook. You'll never miss out on any updates or events or interesting research designed to help you. So on behalf of the FullContact team, thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in May in Denver at Connect 17. And for now, this presentation is a wrap.